All right. It being 6:30, I will call to order a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, November 8th. It is 6:30. We are in the OSD Innovation Center at Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak? Ms. Garrison? Here. Mr. Mehring?
Here.
Dr. Lakuta?
Here.
Mr. LeBrun?
Here.
Mr. Pankratz?
Here.
Ms. Flanagan?
Here. Board does have a quorum. Per Board Policy 566 and the Public Health Madison and Dane County Emergency Order dated November 5th, all individuals who wish to attend the meeting must wear appropriate face coverings for the duration of the meeting. Masks are available at the entrance should anyone need that. We do have a proof of notice from Katie that this meeting has been properly posted, so if anyone wants to take a look at that, Ms. Heitz will have that. On our agenda this evening, we have our normal consent calendar items. We do have 3 action items, and then we do have some discussion items, and then the board will consider going into closed session at the close of this meeting. So I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to the consent calendar. If there's any item that any board members wish to have removed from the consent calendar, please let me know. Otherwise, we have the following donations. Brian and Angela Vetrovec giving account, $600 for Chris Burns' kindergarten class at Netherwood Knoll. Brooklyn Methodist Church for $409 for the Brooklyn Elementary Needs Fund, and then $250 from Elaine Langer Allen for the Oregon High School Band Program. We really appreciate those individuals giving to the Oregon School District, so thank you so much. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Is there a second? Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Mehring?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison? Dr. Lakuta? Mr. Pankratz? Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries. Next on the agenda, moving to B information items is public comment. District Policy 18005 provides an opportunity for the public to address the board. Speakers will have 3 minutes in which to make their comments, and Ms. Heitz will signal the speaker when their time is up. When the individual comes to the speaker, they would announce their name and where they live in the district. The board will not comment after each speaker, and we reserve discussion to any items on the agenda. Speakers are welcome to stay for the meeting should those agenda items appear should those be discussed as agenda items. Next steps following public comment may include referral to the appropriate administrator for follow-up with the speaker or placement of the matter on a future board agenda. First speaker, Mr. Palmer. Come up to the table and the floor is yours for 3 minutes.
I'll repeat that for you. I'm Rob Palmer, 633 Prairie Grass Road, Oregon, Wisconsin, 53575. On April 28th, I addressed the board with a number of questions about OSD's best practices for supporting transgender non-binary students and their allies policy, and followed up with an email. Dr. Leslie Bergstrom finally responded to me on September 14th. Unfortunately, as I've come to expect from this school district and superintendent, she did not answer all of my questions, nor were her responses completely truthful. Dr. Bergstrom said, the Best Practices Guide is a working draft. We chose the title Best Practices because the intent of the guide, when finalized, is to guide our process with students who are transitioning. 7 months after the Best Practices was presented, Dr. Bergstrom attempts to characterize the Best Practices policy as a working draft. Unfortunately, none of the evidence supports her characterization. I watched the entire February 15th presentation for OSD teachers and staff. At no point was it described as a working draft. I have reviewed all the materials provided to me in a public records request. Not a single document was marked draft. The Oregon School District provided me copious amounts of information about the best practices policy on March 26th. Wisconsin public records law does not require public entities to release draft documents. In March, Dr. Bergstrom and Ms. Gina Jonan clearly did not think best practices was a working draft. On the first and second day of school, it appears more than one teacher required students to complete an online survey asking which pronouns they wish to use in class and which pronouns the teacher should use when communicating with parents. Perhaps the most telling evidence that best practices was never a working draft is that Dr. Bergstrom never communicated to principals, teachers, and staff that it was a working draft. On October 6th, I submitted a public records request for all emails and correspondence dated September 1st, 2020 and later from Dr. Bergstrom to OSD teachers and staff, referring to the best practices as a working draft and acknowledging that it is not yet finalized. It did not surprise me that Dr. Bergstrom and Ms. Jonan could not provide me a single email or piece of correspondence communicating to principals, teachers, etc., that best practices was a working draft or not yet finalized. Tonight, you will consider adopting changes to OSD Board Policy 324, which governs how parents and teachers can change their names. I have reviewed your working draft and understand it to require the permission of a parent or legal guardian to change the official name of the student as it appears on student IDs, transportation pass, yearbook, athletic rosters, etc. I do not read anything in the policy to authorize teachers and staff from using one name and gender for the student at school and a different name when communicating with parents or legal guardians. Do you believe the revised OSD board policy permits teachers and staff to use one name in the classroom to include in the grade books and attendance rosters and a different name when communicating with parents and legal guardians? I recognize Ms. Jonan's restrictive interpretation of Wisconsin's open meeting law shields the board from having to respond to public comments at board meetings. However, I note this issue is on the agenda, and Ms. Flanagan has declared this meeting properly noticed. I look forward to hearing your answer. I also look forward to hearing from Dr. Bergstrom on how she plans to communicate the revised OSD Board Policy 324 to principals, teachers, and staff.
Mr. Palmer, your
I
time
hope
is up.
she is
Thank
more
you.
effective this time. Thank you.
Next up is Katie Kazabowski. I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name incorrectly.
Hi, I'm Katie. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Katie Kazabowski, and I live at 5483 Windridge Road, Oregon, Wisconsin, 53575. I'm the state lead for Decoding Dyslexia Wisconsin, and I have two students who are ages 12 and 14, and they both have dyslexia. And so I'm just here to talk about literacy and dyslexia for a few minutes. I lost my note card. I rewrote my notes quick, so bear with me here. My daughter was in 4K in kindergarten in the Oregon School District, and she did not receive the help that she needed. We ended up having to pull her to homeschool her and get her some help. We tried to re-enter the district after a neuropsych exam of dyslexia in 2017 and again in 2018, where we were told by the special ed director that our students had to be enrolled for the district to do a special education evaluation, which I later found out is not true because we live in district. I gave her our address. So our journey has been long, and it's been a difficult decision for us to remain homeschoolers. You know, the benefits of public school and social activities are great. Oregon has made great strides. You guys have you have a lot of resources that other schools don't have. Your reading scores are pretty great. It would be great if you could help the students that have a severe reading disability and get them the help they need. So I'm just asking you to consider, I know that some teachers were trained at Carroll University, and I'm please begging you to have a plan to implement them district-wide because it's such a gift. Other schools don't have that type of expertise, and you guys could be leaders. There's ESSER, ARPA funding for the Literacy Leadership Training Institute that can be through the CISA. And there's also the Dyslexia Guidebook that the Department of Instruction published in, I believe, August. And that is to be published on the district website December 1st. Within the guidebook, I was on the guidebook committee also. Within the guidebook is the suggestion to have a community dyslexia committee. And I think that would be a great opportunity for the school board or somewhere in the district, wherever you can house it, to really engage with students that have a reading disability such as dyslexia. So you've made great strides, and I just plead with you to have a plan to implement it. So thank you.
Thank you, Katie. All right, so that is all that have registered for public comment. Moving on to OEA report. Laura, I think. Thank you. Okay. Student report, Leslie and I had talked about the student representation, and so she's going to be working on that the rest of this, and then we'll have that at the board in January, as we'll have a rotating representation. Moving on to C action items. couple things from policy. The first is the 2022-2023 calendar. Because Anna is not here, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
Thank you, Krista. So the team met back on October 20th to take on two different topics. The first one being the 21-22 school year calendar. We know that always brings up a lot of vibrant discussion every year on several topics related to multiple issues, especially around spring break, start of school year, end of school year, etc. So we will jump into that to begin with and then move on to policy 324. So since the recommendation of the policy committee is to approve the calendar as printed over there and as provided in your board packet, that is the motion. And if there's any further discussion points from either Krista or Gina, I'll have you add in.
Okay, so Kevin has recommended from the policy committee that we approve the option 2, 2022-2023 calendar. I think I'm going to start with Gina, so Gina can give board members a background that we're not at policy, and then we'll go around and see who has discussion points. Sorry, did I get the right color too right?
Okay, thank you. So the policy committee, as Mr. Mehring stated, recommended calendar number 2. You will also see calendar number 1, which I brought tonight and put on the table over there for handouts if that's helpful for the discussion. These are the 2 calendars that the policy committee discussed. And so to start with the process, on the September policy meeting, we talked about the process for the calendar, which is similar to previous years, where we send a survey to all staff and families about their preferences for the calendar. And then we also met with OEA subcommittee to discuss their thoughts about the calendar. And then in October, the policy committee met and reviewed the OEA feedback. There were OEA members that attended and looked at the survey results and then talked through all of the possibilities. And so we were very happy to see we had over 1,000 respondents to our survey, which usually we have between 800 and 1,000. So that was wonderful. And I did highlight in the purple a few of the results that came back on the survey. More people than not, we always ask about professional development days because we have some flexibility of when we schedule those. We do try to coordinate those with times during the school year where we can review data and then reflect on our practices and then engage them in the classroom. And so a lot of times our families provide feedback that they would like them around a holiday or another break because it's easier for childcare or travel plans. So then when we moved into the non-student days, and this has been consistent since I've been here, that if we look at our calendar, that most of our families and staff prefer that December 23rd is a non-student day, followed by the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and then followed by a 2-day break in October. So you will see that reflected in both calendars that went to policy committee. Then we also did ask about January 2nd being a non-student day because there was some interest in that, and that was preferred or strongly preferred by 63% of our community. And then this year we also asked about Good Friday in terms of being a non-student day, and that came back as 53% strongly prefer or prefer. Then we also asked about spring break and gave 3 options for spring break in the survey. And 45% ranked the week of March 27th, which was the most preferred week. So you will see that in calendar 2 as well. And so I would say much of the discussion at policy talked about, one, we try to have as even a semester as possible, but we also try to balance that with having a professional development day between semesters so that the students can have a transition day from semester 1 to semester 2, and staff can prepare for that as well. And we try to balance that. We often are not able to balance that just because there are more breaks in the first part of the year than the second. And that traditionally has been fine because we do more testing in the spring. So, but we had a lot of discussion about that. And then we also talked about Good Friday. And we did a survey of area districts about who has students on that day, who has it as a holiday. And I would say districts that are Dane County schools tend to not have that as a holiday, and other schools have it as a professional development day. And so we talked a lot about that, and where policy landed was that we thought it would be best to, at least next year, try to have it as a professional development day and still have it as a non-student day. And so because we do have the practice in our district of honoring religious observance for students and staff on religious holidays to them. And so there is a question for us about how many staff or families would have religious observances on that day, and to try to accommodate that for our students and staff. So where policy landed, and people who are present, please correct me, is that we felt that next year it would be beneficial to try it as a professional development day, just to see if we have significant interest in religious observance and what that means, and potentially pursue a different path after the 22-23 school year. So with that, I will turn it back over to Ms. Flanagan.
All right, let's start with policy committee members that were at the meeting in case they want to have discussion, and we'll start with seniority. So Kevin, you are up.
I really don't have many other additional comments except that, this was a vibrant discussion. Probably took a lot longer than we anticipated in the meeting, but important topics to discuss for sure. And I think the aim was to try to be as balanced and to respect the feedback we got as much as possible on the surveys. And I think, in terms of the Good Friday issue, it was something that, walk before you run was kind of the theme, and it allows the students from a religious perspective to, respect that if that's a religious holiday they observe. And it gave also some flexibility. I mean, the teachers have a professional day, but there's also some flexibility when there's, religious issues there as well to take personal day. So from my perspective, it gave good balance and was a compromise for the most part. Yeah, and then, the topic of spring break, I think we looked to match it with local spring breaks, which was a strong feedback on the survey. So I don't know, Mary, if you have any additional comments.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. The one other thing that I wanted to bring up, we had a very good conversation around lessons learned from our last year in 2019, 2020. And the fact that last year's schedule did allow for collaboration among the educators. And this calendar that we're bringing to you does not account for that. We talked a lot about the possibility of reintroducing half-days, but would not want to do that without community input. And so I think that would either require a survey or a task force, which I know Anna had raised the possibility of having a task force to discuss some of these issues. So I think we all heard very powerfully at the end of last school year the benefits to both our educators and our students of that collaborative time. And so I think that's something that we need to be forward-looking at.
All right, thanks, Mary. I'll go to Troy.
All right, thanks. And I did have the opportunity to sit in on the policy committee meeting. Calendars are complicated. Lots of great discussion at that meeting. I guess I'll just weigh into where I stand. I will not support this motion. Personally, I'm a Christian. I'm a Catholic. I observe Good Friday myself, but I'm also a board member of a public school. And when I look at the differences between Calendar 1 and Calendar 2, I see that Good Friday stands out as really the reason that we have that Friday off following. It's the week right after spring break. And when I look at that calendar that we're proposing, we have a 7-week span of direct instruction without a break. And I just feel like calendar option number 1 moves that professional development day and that student, that off day for students a little further into the month of April, and it provides a better balance for our students and teachers to get a break in April. So that's my feeling on the calendar. And I guess I would also comment on the survey. We saw that more respondents preferred that January 2nd be a non-student day than Good Friday. So that kind of stood out to me as well. So that's where I stand.
Thanks, Troy. Tim, to you.
I was volleying those two back and forth, the January 2nd and Good Friday as well. And I absolutely can appreciate where you're coming from, Troy. I know that this so much more goes into this calendar than we can all appreciate. It's a big discussion every year, and I always wondered why, and now I know why. And so I don't have any wisdom more than you've already covered. And so I just want to let you know that I appreciate the challenge you have.
Heather?
I just want to start out by saying how spectacular it is that our district offers a survey and incorporates parent feedback. That is definitely not the case at every district. So I think we could pause here and just take a moment of gratitude for that. I also just, in walking through this, I love the fact that the top 3 responses, majority-wise, were able to accommodate those with the day off before Thanksgiving and the December 23rd and the January 2nd. But I share Troy's views. I wouldn't be able to support calendar number 2. I think, you know, from an equity lens and from staying away from the religious aspect, I too, you know, am a Christian, but that is just not something that I'm willing to support in a calendar. And I can appreciate the walk before we run, but I just think now is the time we know better, so we do better.
Great, thanks, Heather. Mary, to your point, just in terms of some long-term visioning, I think that's wrapped in the conversation we had at the last meeting in terms of starting with a board workshop to really look at not only professional development in terms of staff, but also long-term and short-term strategies on staffing, professional development, collaboration time, what the school year looks like. So that would be something that we would not specifically do to calendar. We would take broader issues, and so that will be forthcoming to the board in terms of the next steps that Leslie and I will share with everyone about those sorts of ruminations and conversations. So thank you for bringing it up. Okay, any further discussion? Go ahead, Mary.
So, just Heather and Troy, I completely support your statements and rationale for wanting not to have Good Friday. My only rationale for supporting having Good Friday as a professional development day is since we as a district don't have history with having that as a school day, we don't know what percentage of our teachers, our educators, are going to want that day off. And so the concern, especially given our current substitute situation, was that we may have too few teachers to actually conduct that as a student day.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Mehring?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
No.
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
No.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 3, or
4.
can I count 4-2? So it's hard when you have a board member missing, you got to do math. All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda, Policy 324, student record changes.
So the second topic of Policy 324 was also discussed quite extensively back on October 20th. And, you know, you can see from the draft that's available on the table over there and available in your board packet, quite a few changes, recognizing both the difference between a legal name and official name. You know, the consideration around parental approval for children students under 18 was something that was discussed quite a bit and was a strong requirement from my perspective related to this policy. It's obviously a short policy, but one that brings a lot of discussion and emotion. So, Gina, I don't know if you want to provide some further or
Kevin, do you
Ms.
want to put a
Flanagan?
motion on the table first, then we'll move to discussion?
Okay. So, yeah, the motion from the policy committee, thanks for the reminder, is
Sure.
to approve Policy 324 as presented in your packet.
Okay, because it comes from committee, it does not require a second. So Gina, we'll start with you for background.
So just to frame the discussion in terms of definitions, so in the past, Infinite Campus is the software that we use to keep our student records for the most part. And one of our challenges is that they have a legal name field and then they have a nickname field. And the way that we generate yearbooks, transcripts, diplomas is by pulling the legal name from Infinite Campus. They can sometimes be manually changed, but that's the system that we use to generate it, not the nickname field. And so, for example, if your name is James Pliner, but you go by Jim, James Pliner would be the legal name, and then Jim would be in the nickname field. So, but generally, then we would have James Planner on the transcript and the diploma in the yearbook. And so one of the things that we have been asking from Infinite Campus when we do have students and parents who want to change their legal name is that there wasn't a different field where we could keep that legal name, because often for financial aid for colleges, for background checks that we receive often from the government or the military, for Social Security and Medicaid billing, we had to have a way to keep that legal name to find that, especially after students had graduated. And so now there has been an upgrade to Infinite Campus where we can have what we want to call now the official name, and you'll see it in the policy. So the official name would be the name that's in Infinite Campus on the student record, but behind the scenes we could keep the legal name so that if we ever received an inquiry where because the Social Security number for those who have it matches the legal name. And so with that change, that's why you see this policy in front of you. And so because we have had requests from parents who want to change that, what I'll call now the official name in Infinite Campus, but we didn't have a way to maintain that legal name. And we know for many of our students that when they change their name, it can be traumatic for them to see their legal name until they're old enough or want to go through that process to change it legally with a court. So that was the genesis of this policy, was at parent request that there be a way to change what we'd like to call that official name in Infinite Campus, and that will be where all the student records will pull from. And so this policy only goes to records and what's kept in Infinite Campus. The intent is not to change students who want to be called a different name in class. So for example, if James Planner wants to be called Jim in class, and many of our students do go by nicknames, Jim can be called Jim in class, if that is his preference. And because under the law, we are not able to discriminate on the basis of transgender, that if Kyle wanted to be called Kim in class, Kyle would be called Kim, just like James could be called Jim. But this policy speaks to student records. So Kyle could not change the official name to Kim in Infinite Campus without parent permission following this policy, or unless Kyle or Kim was 18, and then parents would receive notification.
Okay, back to you, Kevin. Any further comment?
No further comments, no.
Mary?
No, I think that sums it up.
All right, Tim? Heather? Troy? Okay. If there's no further discussion, Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Maring,
Yes.
Ms. Garrison, Dr. Lakuta, Mr. LeBrun,
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz, Ms. Flanagan.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you to the policy committee. You guys have been really busy this year, so thank you for bringing those forward. Next on the agenda is the Metropolitan Unified Fiber Network Consortium joining agreement. Whew, Andy.
Thank you. So this is an agreement that we've been kind of envisioning for actually several years. The idea was to find a way to create a way to basically to the internet. I'm simplifying a little bit, but to find a way to the internet without going through a third-party provider. We found that it's a third-party provider, but a nonprofit consortium group made up of large institutions in the Dane County area. And so as we went to Forest Edge, we decided to invest in talking to the Metropolitan Unified Fiber Network, or MUFFIN for short, and found out that they had a significant interest to have access to Oregon, which we thought would be a win-win to provide additional providers of fiber optics to the Oregon area. And so went ahead and kind of had negotiated an agreement with MUFFIN that we would be able to access their point of connection, which is right off the Beltline and very close to Forest Edge, if we allowed them to have 48 pair of fiber optic cables next to basically our cables. Our cables, the majority of the cost associated with that was already incurred because putting one cable into ground or conduit in the ground was basically the same price as putting two. So the only additional cost was the fiber. And so we made that investment with the anticipation that we would be at some point in time in the future joining MUFFIN and then getting our internet access, one of 2 internet access points, because we want a redundant network, through Muffin. So we have the fiber now installed. We are getting ready to light the fiber in the next month or so. And Muffin will be acting on our application, our agreement, here in the next couple of weeks as well. And so this is just basically putting this in place. In return for putting those cables all the way to Oregon from basically the Beltline, the district will receive free internet access, essentially through the fiber optic cables, for 10 years. And at that point in time, we'll be charged the same as everybody else that is on the network. So a good deal in that regard. And we'll actually become a voting member of the Muffin. With they don't like us to talk about who's a part of it, but think about the big players in the area, and you've got them. So basically, it's a fiber network ring around the Madison area. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
My first question is, Gina, as legal counsel, have you reviewed this agreement?
Yes, I have.
Okay, thank you. Tim, go ahead.
Andy, could you refresh my memory what our investment was?
So that's a great question. Our investment to get to Muffin is around $250,000.
And again, that buys us free internet for 10 years.
And then the discounted rates after that as being a part of that compared to working with Charter or TDS or something like that.
And
Keep-
you meant, well, I'm
I
sorry.
was just going to say, keep in mind also that this is an unrestricted speed. So people like to talk about fiber optics in the regard that it's kind of future-proofing, if you would, because nobody has quite got to the point where they say you can't get more speed through a fiber optic cable. They continue to come up with technology that allows you to get faster and faster, and that's obviously important. We are now occasionally hitting our 1 gigabit limitation on one of our access points. And this will be moving us right from the get-go to 10 gigabits. If we wanted to go to something faster than that, we could do that, and Muffin would not care because it's basically just the strand of fiber.
So it was $250,000 to buy in, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
And you mentioned that we have 2 access points because we have a redundant network.
Yep. Now, only one of them is through this. The other
Right.
one will be acquired through conventional means, but at a gigabit speed.
Like through TDS.
Correct.
And today, we have 2 of those
We have
access
2 that we
points.
pay, 2 1 gigabit connections, correct.
And we're going to be able to eliminate one of those. And what is
Correct.
the cost of one of those?
Several thousand a month.
Okay, 2,000,
Yeah,
5,000?
it's a little bit, it's between 2 and 3, I think.
Okay, so $2,500,
Sure.
round number, so $15,000 a year.
Mhm.
We're saving $15,000 a year over 10 years, $150,000, but we're spending $250,000 to get access. Is that?
So the math might be a little off there. If it's
Okay.
$2,500
Oh, I'm
times
sorry, it's
12.
$30,000.
Right.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yep.
So,
But we're also getting 10 times the speed.
okay,
So if we were to price that out through
sure, a
Charter
higher
or JDS,
speed through
A,
TDS or
we're not even
Charter.
sure they're capable of it. B, it would be significantly more costly than the $2,500.
And do you know what the cost, today's cost would be when the cost goes back to and the only reason I ask is we've all been part of a internet network where we get a great deal for 12 months, 24 months, and then we get hosed from that point forward.
Sure.
Unless we change,
Yep.
where we walk away from who knows what.
I do not know the cost of that, but we would be hosing ourselves because we'll be part of the people voting at what those rates are.
Okay.
Do you understand
Yeah.
that component?
Yep, I
Yep.
understand
So
that
so
lingo.
we can't be treated differently than, think of a large employer in Dane County.
Sure.
We would be treated the same as they are.
Okay, all right. I don't have any other questions right now.
All right.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kevin.
So these aforementioned bigger players,
Yes.
to be named maybe at a later date.
I can tell you after.
Yeah, sure. I can figure it out anyway. So
Yeah,
I guess my
probably.
main question is it somehow scaled per the usage by these different entities, or everyone pays in at the same amount?
I think the idea is the fiber connection is the fiber connection, and like
Okay.
I said before, you can put as much through that fiber connection as you want.
Okay.
So I
And
think.
we're all paying equally for that access, it sounds
Right,
like.
right.
Okay.
Now, if you wanted a separate strand, like there's multiple strands, and
Sure.
I think they go in pairs.
Yep.
John, is John here? John's not here, darn it. If they go in, if you wanted a separate strand for something else, there'd be a cost associated with that. But
Okay.
my understanding is there has been no physical limitation as to how much you can put through these strands at this point in time.
Okay. And you said we've had some limitations, or are they disruptions with our current setup, or just
We've
from time to
burst
time?
up to the 1 megabit speed a couple times. In fact, when we were looking at it the last week, Josh and Rory told me that we had hit it around lunchtime.
Oh, wow.
So I think
Not a surprise, probably, with all
Right.
the people on their phones
Right.
and stuff. Okay.
so. I think you're allowed to kind of burst through that without much of a disruption. But if you were to sustain that, I think our provider would have a problem.
Okay. Thank you. No more questions.
Any other questions, Mary?
Yeah, just noticing that on the second page of the agreement, 6 and 7 by my eye look identical to
Oh.
one another. I could be missing something subtle, but they do seem to be exactly the same.
Okay, I apologize for that.
No worries. And then I think you may have just answered it, but in the contract language, it says an initial speed of 10 gigabits per second. And so what's the rate limiting factor there? Is that like the equipment in I can't remember what the term is, but the junction box essentially, or what is
Yeah,
the rate limit?
yeah. The limitation is really the equipment that you put on the ends of the fiber.
Okay.
And you can replace those with newer technology, go faster, that type of thing. But right now, we felt like going from 1 gigabit to 10 should sustain us for quite a while.
And whose responsibility would that upgrade be?
That's a great question. I believe it is ours.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Heather or Troy?
I do, but, okay, thank you for walking us through this, Andy. I have just one question, but I just want to make sure I've got it right since we did the math. So in the first 10 years, the savings already covers the investment.
It should, yes.
Good, right. And then, I apologize if I missed this. So now let's call it that we're at $2,500 a month that we can effectively get rid of. What is a current large employer in Dane County that's part of Muffin paying per, what is our monthly
What will be the cost after 10 years?
I realize we can't know in 10 years, but like right now, do we know what somebody's paying instead of $2,500 a month?
Off the top of my head, I do not, but I can get that information and provide it for
I was just curious if, is it $2,000 or is it $300?
Right.
What kind of
My
cost
understanding compared to a private third party, it should be significantly less, but I do not know the actual cost.
Okay, and then just on a complete side note, Saturday Night Live spoofed canceling your cable this weekend, so with Spectrum, so I feel like we could all just take a watch of that after this conversation.
We should not receive that type of experience.
Okay, good.
Andy, I just have one question. Page number 2, number 9, the member or its agent will be solely responsible for providing management. Example is Digger's Hotline, locating, cable marking, repair, extraordinary relocation. I guess what catches my eye is the Digger's Hotline and needing to locate the cable in if there's a construction project along the route of the cable. How are we set up to do that as a district, or how would that be handled?
We transitioned a number of years ago to a company that actually monitors that for us and then charges us per occurrence. And it is not a cheap service at this point, especially within the Village of Oregon. With everything going on, it's been a little bit more costly than we want. So keep in mind that we have a fiber network in already to Forest Edge. So the only additional cost that we have in this regard would be from basically Forest Edge to the Beltline, that location. And there will be some development around there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But otherwise, all of our schools are already connected. We're paying that
We
cost.
have to.
Yeah, there's no additional cost there.
Right.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none. Oh, go ahead.
Do all the consortium members pay the exact same amount to get in?
Well, so this has been in place since 2013, 2012. I think it's kind of grew up. When I saw the group getting together, there were lower costs to get in at the beginning, and then I think they used a lot of grants and that type of thing to do that. So our cost is really related to bringing that fiber to Oregon. I will tell you that Verona School District tried to get in, and to my understanding, they were not able to get in. So we had something that was valuable to this area. And again, offline, I could probably tell you a little bit about what they're trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any additional discussion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll? Oh, sorry, we need a motion on the floor. Is there a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Garrison? Dr. Lakuta? Yes. Mr. Maring?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz? Yes. Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. All right, we are now moving on to D, discussion items. First item on the agenda is committee reports. So Kevin, back to policy.
All right, back pinch hitting again here. So not much to talk about except that we have a meeting coming up next Monday, so a week from today, where there'll be more topics to discuss. That's really all I have to report.
Well done on the pinch hit tonight. Vision steering, Troy.
Yep, we met last week, I believe it was. We had 3 agenda items. Number 1 was our decision-making framework. We did some work on that, updates, and that is actually going to go to policy, I believe, for their next meeting. The second item was the portrait of a graduate. We continued our work on that, and that we intend to get to policy as well for their November 15th meeting. That'll just go to policy as a preview, as that is still in the process for communication and community engagement. And then the third item was our recreational space study, and we are continuing to progress on the discussions of conducting that future study. And that's all.
Great, thank you. On to Worth Woods. Tim.
We had several meetings since the last time we got together. We met at the Environmental Center this past week with an architect to just review the structure of the building and what was, where bearing walls were or not. And overall, just an overall review of the building. It is a very well-built building, without question. It needs some maintenance, but it's very well built, and we got a pretty good idea of how much flexibility we have of taking things out and taking down walls and things like that, just to get a better idea of what the base structure is. We talked about having the building drawn up by an architect. We are looking into, I have a meeting tomorrow at the city of Fitchburg to see if we can get some records, maybe give us a running start at those architectural plans. We also met twice on the civil engineering side talking about access. And we're making our way towards a proposal to the city of Fitchburg to talk about what our access options are at the Environmental Center. So we're making good progress. It doesn't look like we're doing anything out there, but lots is going on behind the scenes. We have another meeting next week. Is that right? Or is it this week, Andy? Oh, it's tomorrow. Oh, it is tomorrow. Wednesday. All right. Very good. Thank you, Katie.
All right, thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Thanks to all the committee chairs. Moving on to D2, mental health survey results. I will turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. So we're calling this a mental health update with the understanding that mental health is actually a big, broad bucket and that there are many things underneath it. And this particular survey that we'll be sharing, and it's from the spring of 2021, really is measuring the skills we are building to help students related to their emotional wellness. So we'll show you a little bit about what this survey was like. The first administration was in spring of 21. However, we are currently administering it for the fall, and we'll be doing it again in the spring. And these are the things that you see on the screen are the things that we are trying to measure. Emotional regulation, self-management, social awareness, perceptions related to school safety, sense of belonging, and the valuing of school. And each of these categories have several questions beneath them. And then each category is given a score. And then the score is displayed so that we understand where we fall against national norms, because that's a really important piece to understand where we're at in each of these important categories. So for our students in grades 3 through 5, and I know this is a little hard to read, but I think the dot visual is helpful. Because if you're looking at it right now and you can see what is over to the right, the further over the green dot is, the better we compare nationally. For example, under self-management, our score of 79%, and that means 79% of our students chose the two best options when answering the question. That puts us in the, I think it is the 80th to 99th percentile nationally for our scores. So this is grades 3 through 5 because the survey is only officially administered in that grade range at the elementary level. Our students last spring, 93% of them completed it. And you can see that all of our bubbles are green and that 4 out of the 6 are at the highest national percentile. So when you look at the skills that we are intentionally building with our students in grades 3 through 5, right now, it looks like as of last spring, things were going very well in the building of those skills and the sense of belonging and value at school. Now, as I said, we're administering it again this fall, and we do expect that we will see some shifts. In just a minute, you can see exactly where I'm hoping we see the shifts. Because when you get to grade 6 and as you move forward, you start to see some areas where we are in either the lowest quartile or the second lowest quartile when you look at something on a national level. For instance, our students are still doing very well in grade 6 with emotional regulation and self-management. Social awareness, you see a bit of a drop there from where the group in 3-5 was. School safety remains consistently high throughout every single grade level. But in grade 6, you start to see a bit of a drop in sense of belonging and valuing of school. Now remember, this was administered in the spring, and our students had had a very unusual year. And our students in grades 5 and above had had less time physically in school than our younger students had. So I think that's something to keep in mind, and we really look forward to seeing the fall data and how that plays out. Because you can see a similar pattern here too. For grades 7 and 8, the first 3 either remain high or in the average range. But when we get to school safety, remains high, but belonging and value of school remains low. You also see for the grades 7 through 8 that it was an 80% response rate as opposed to 93% for the younger kids. Now, if we move to grades 9 through 12, you have a response rate of 47%. So that's an important piece to keep in mind when analyzing this data. But once again, you see the categories that are up on the top of the screen. We performed very well compared to national averages. Top quartile for emotional regulation, self-management, second to highest for social awareness, highest for school safety. But again, sense of belonging and valuing of school were slightly lower. I wouldn't even say slightly. So if you can't read it very well, under sense of belonging, the definition is how much students feel that they are valued members of the school community. For valuing school, how much students feel that school is interesting, important, and useful. Now, when you're looking at the data, you can think quite a bit about the changes that adolescents might have and how they view things and how that impacts it, except for our scores are compared in national norms. So I think that does tell us something, and it certainly is something that we're very excited to see what the fall data looks like and what we can learn from it in relation to what we see here in the spring. But then also it leads us into what exactly are we going to do with this information? Okay, so I'll move to that. Buildings certainly reviewed the spring data, and they're in the process of finishing up the fall survey. And they're using that to determine building goals, because remember, we have competency goals related to reading and math, but we also have goals that are related to students and their mental health and their social emotional wellness. And certainly valuing of school and belonging in school are pretty significant things in relation to that. So we will be looking at that and setting goals, and that's already happened to a great degree, because a lot of the work that our SEL coaches are planning at the schools and are implementing at the schools are connected to what they saw in the spring panorama survey. Teachers, as part of their educator effectiveness cycles too, in addition to administrators, have an opportunity to either write student learning objectives as part of their own goal setting or school learning objectives as part of goal setting. And I do expect that we will be using this data in the setting of our own goals as individual practitioners. I also want to point out that I really think we're working on the right things, because our focus is on one of our many areas of focus, but a big one is on creating inclusive and equitable learning environments. And that strongly correlates to the idea of a sense of belonging within school. So the things that we have been doing, the things that we have been talking about related to making sure students feel safe and welcome and valued, that's very much a part of how we plan to, that work continuing is very much a part of how we plan to address what we see in the panorama survey. And as far as valuing of school, to me that really speaks of relevance and students being able to see the relevance in what they're doing and being able to create relevance for students is a significant part of the personalized learning focus that has been a part of us for quite a while now. And there's some really targeted professional development that is aimed at helping to ensure that what we're putting in front of students, they can see the relevance to their lives. So a lot of the things that we're doing are geared toward what we are seeing here. And then of course we won't have solid plans in place until we're able to see the fall 2021 data, as well as spring 22, because we really want to see what does spring look like when you're not in the midst of a pandemic. Because who we were compared against, I don't know what their school years were like or how much time they were within the building proper. So there are some just real unknowns related to last year's survey data. I also want to just really talk about the good work that's being done to address what we're seeing here already. Admire all that they are already doing and all that they are planning to do moving forward. And we can talk about that more when we bring you the fall data, because we'd like you to be able to see that and then talk about what our plans are. And also we have Dane County Youth Assessment data now in comparison to urban suburban schools, and rural schools who took the survey. And so I think that fits into helping us understand where our kids are at, where our areas of focus should be, and what's really going to be important for all of us to address moving forward. So we'll have that at in the next, if not on the 22nd, the following board meeting.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bergstrom. So we'll see who has questions. We can go around. Troy, I'll start with you.
No questions. I guess I would just comment, I think some of the data is not really where we want it to be, but I'm really glad that we have the data, we're looking at it, and that we have action steps that are already underway. So that's my only comment.
Tim.
Maybe I've seen some of this before, but it doesn't look familiar to me. Have we done this survey before, pre-pandemic?
No, last spring was the first implementation of the survey.
Around the country?
No, just for Oregon.
Oh, just for Oregon. Okay. Do you know how long they've been doing this survey? How long it's been in existence?
No, I don't. I can certainly find that out, but I don't know how long that the company has been running the same survey.
Okay. That's all I have.
Heather.
Tim asked my first question, so thank you. I just, two comments, I think. You know, we continue to talk about the value of SEL, and I think that's just such a testament to the green buttons and the high scores that we're seeing throughout. And so I'm really grateful that that's such a big part of our curriculum, and it starts, even though this survey is from 3 to 5, that learning starts, you know, as early as 4K. I'm also excited to see the fall results. I think we all hope that the sense of belonging and valuing of school increases just purely by being in school, but I think it's important, and you noted the continued growth of our inclusive and equitable education, and because I think just being in school isn't going to solve all that, and I know you know that, but I think it's such a testament to where we've come from, what we're doing, and how we're continuing to make an emphasis on that.
Kevin.
So you indicated that this is new to the district, but it's not a new survey. How long, I mean, has the survey been going on in general? Is this like a 5-year, 10-year?
I'm sorry, I don't have the
Okay.
answer to that. I'm wondering if perhaps some of my colleagues out there could take a look and see if we can find out, but
Okay.
I don't have an answer.
Yeah, I mean, the follow-up question is more just out of curiosity why we haven't participated in the past. Was it just not familiar with it, or cost, or just a new?
I think it's something that was really brought to our attention when we started to talk about how we measure the effectiveness of our social emotional learning curriculum. And we know that if we're placing the high value on it.
Yeah.
We're spending a lot of time on it. So we need to know how it's working.
Okay. And just so I understand as well, there's no way in this survey to separate, you know, schools that were primarily in person versus not in person to see the difference.
Not for our national data, but just as an example, for the elementary schools, our Forest Edge students scored slightly lower in sense of belonging than the other elementary schools, which made a lot of sense because it was a brand new school.
Yeah.
And some of the kids had only been in it for partial days for part of the year. So we could parse it out within our district, but not at the national level.
Okay. And then last question from a participation perspective, I guess it's not a shock that it drops as the kids approach teenage years, but it's obviously voluntary.
Well, it's going to be a part of the actual, Mr. Kleider can't help you.
Our numbers were low because we administered through our Panther Connections last year, which was asynchronous on Wednesdays.
No.
When we weren't in session. And so I think most of the other schools administered that in person, and we chose to do it through our Wednesday async.
Oh, okay.
Panther Connections rather than using class time in-house. And I'm quite sure that led to our underperformance.
So we can't blame them for being teenagers, but obviously anything we do to get that up would be fantastic. All right, thank you.
Mary.
So excuse me, do we actually have the data where we could look to see, are there biphasic groupings of data, or is it a bell curve? I mean, are there plans for any of that sort of look?
Could we give you different views on the data? Yes, we'll be absolutely.
Because that could be telling in how to approach the bringing certain groups along. Thank you.
Any other questions? I just have a couple. One, back to Leslie's point that, we have talked a long time about we have competency benchmarks and measurements. We know how kids test in terms of year over year in math or reading. And I think this is really points to the value of us, and that has come from the board too in terms of what are the standards or how are we measuring that what we're doing in SEL is working, or how do we know where our kids are at. And so I'm really supportive of this kind of data because it tells us where kids are at, where we want to go. Now we have benchmarks to compare year over year. So I think like we have other competency benchmarks, this is really important. The second comment I'll speak to is about sense of belonging. Sometimes I think we expect, and this is just my statement, more of our kids than we expect of ourselves. If you look at the world right now and how we're divided we are as adults, and how sometimes adults, we don't feel a sense of belonging in our community right now, it's no surprise that our kids feel that too. And so I just think sometimes we have to look at ourselves as adults and not just as a school district, but us as adults. Are we cultivating a sense of community and belonging in this community that we live in for our kids. And that's not to say we don't have to agree and get along, but we all have a role in making sure our kids feel a sense of belonging in whatever community they're in, and this school district community. And that can be outside the school walls and it can be inside. So I just want to let staff know that it's not all your responsibility. This community bears responsibility in making sure our kids feel belonging. So that's just my own soapbox for just a second. Any other questions or comments? All right, thanks, Leslie. Moving on to update on health and safety measures.
All right. Okay, a lot has happened since we last spoke, so there's quite a bit to discuss tonight. I'm grateful it's a discussion item. So you know our Back Together plan for the 21-22 school year, and it's focused on two main priorities. And you know what those are. Those are mental and physical wellness of our students and high quality teaching and learning. And I will also say that things are going really, really quite well. Because if you look at what we set out as our goal at the beginning of the school year, safe in-person learning environment, and we're keeping our students in school with minimal disruptions. And we have done that. And we have done that for a variety of reasons that we will talk about tonight. Things that we have, strategies we have implemented that have led us to be able to do this. And so now that the landscape is beginning to change yet again, we can talk a little bit about what safety layers do we keep and what do we consider peeling back as other data changes. So as we re-examine our safety protocols overall, there are a number of factors that will influence how we move forward. You see in the center is our goal, students in school with minimal disruption, right? We don't want students out on quarantine constantly. We don't want to close classrooms. We don't want to close schools. We want, once we're in, we're in. And, you know, I think it's important to note that our phased approach last year, there were no steps backwards. It was consistent momentum forward. And I feel that's still where we are at today. So we'll walk through each of these and how they connect with one another and what is changing and what is the same. Let's see. You know that the OSD policy and health guidance, we'll be talking about that in quite some depth. We know that our students who are ages 5 to 11 are now eligible for the vaccine. We know that any change we make to our masking policy will have an impact on close contacts and quarantines. And we also know that our local data is pretty darn good. If you look at Dane County, and we'll talk about that, we're good in comparison to the rest of the state, even though we remain high overall. But the Oregon School District data related to the number of secondary transmissions, meaning an infection that happens outside of school is a primary, an infection that happens within our school due to contact within our school is a secondary, we have remained remarkably low. We're participating in a study that is school districts across the nation. I believe it's 128 school districts or something of that nature. And it's through multiple universities based mostly at Duke University. And we have one of the best ratios of cases outside the schools to inside the schools. And they said that is one of the biggest indicators you need to look at when you're considering what should your next safety step be. We have been able, for the most part, to keep transmission out of our schools and keep our kids in school. So that's been a plus. And that's very much because we are guided very specifically by the policies that the board set back in August 10th of 2020 and then revised on August 9th of 21. The board has been very clear with the administrators regarding what information we should be looking at to formulate our strategies. So we need to continue to look at what is being recommended by multiple agencies. And again, probably no surprise, there's remarkable consistency. They're all continuing to recommend layered safety strategies. So what are those strategies? Well, the number one line of defense is vaccination. So we know that that's important, and we know that we now have a new group of students who will be eligible for that safety strategy. And then we also know that the universal indoor masking for all people, regardless of vaccination status within schools, continues to be a recommendation from the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Department of Health Services in Wisconsin, Public Health, and the UW Pediatric Department. All of those groups are saying, number one is vaccination, and then universal masking. They're also saying maintain 3 feet of distance, screen for symptoms, which is really our Panther pledge, as well as, hand washing etiquette, etc. And then what role does testing, contact tracing, and quarantining play? It continues to play a significant role. Now, all of those organizations are recommending this layered strategy, and that's what we have been implementing, and that is what has been successful so far in helping us to meet our goals. Just as an example of that, I'm going to bring back this particular graphic because it really made a big difference last August when we were talking before there was a mask mandate about how we should approach the school year related to our safety strategies. And you notice that when both parties are masked, quarantining in a classroom is not a requirement. And when in a fully masked environment, it's also the distance of 6 feet for 15 minutes as close contact comes down to less than 3 feet. So we were able to set up our classrooms so that our classrooms met that expectation. So unvaccinated students with their masks on in our classrooms, even if they were a close contact, for the most part, wouldn't have been required to quarantine. And our vaccinated students certainly wouldn't unless they had been symptomatic. So the masked environment up until this point has served us very well. So while there's consistency in what health experts are telling us, it's also really, really important to look at our local data. And you can see on the map that Dane County, while we are still in the high category, we are one of the lowest in the state as far as the number of cases, and it is on a decline. And you'll see that 40% of the cases in the last part of October were for not fully vaccinated people were people under the age of 11. And that group can now be vaccinated. So what does that mean? We will have an increase in the number of students within our school system who are vaccinated, which is very likely to lead to a continued decrease in the number of cases. So when we have that, it's time to start looking at, is there an option of peeling back one of our safety strategies? And I certainly think that, we should be at least considering what's on the menu as far as a rollback. Now, if we're talking about peeling back the mask layer when the Dane County mandate ends on November 27th, it's really important for us to understand what impact that would have and what exactly that means within our system. So this slide is to talk through that just a little bit. So if we were to become a mask optional environment, what that means is our students it moves us from 3 feet for 15 minutes or more cumulative is close contact, it moves it to 6 feet. So if you're in a classroom and we can't get our desks more than 3 feet apart, right? So if you're in a classroom, there will be close contacts. For people who are vaccinated, you do not need to quarantine unless you are symptomatic. So that's a pretty significant piece, right? If their mask is off, they will be close contacts because that's inevitable with the way our classrooms are set up. But they will not need to miss school unless they are symptomatic. However, our students who are not vaccinated, and there will be, as you can see from the chart, there are many students who are not vaccinated. In a mask optional environment, they would need to quarantine if they were within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more of a student who is positive. And our classrooms are set up. So people are definitely within 6 feet of one another within our classroom. So our unvaccinated students, unless our case counts continue to decline, which is predicted, right? Vaccination goes up, case counts should go down. But even if they're going down, there will be instances of quarantine. And that does mean that there are students who may miss school who wouldn't miss school in an environment where we would continue to require masks. And over on the chart on the side, you can see that's the number of families who indicated vaccination back in August when they were registering their student and they had the opportunity to put that data into our system. So there's certainly maybe more people now, and we'll talk in a little bit about how parents can update that information. And we're adding eligibility for a good portion of our students. But in this particular scenario, 7th grade, for example, around 39% of our students in August were not vaccinated, and in a mask optional environment, all of those individuals would be subject to quarantine if indeed they were close contacts. And hopefully there will be fewer cases because of the increase in vaccination, but it is something for us to consider as we move forward. I also asked Katie to pull a little data just to help people understand what this would feel like. If we had started the year as a mask optional environment, we actually had 102 cases within the district, students who were in school during their period of contagion. But because they were in a masked environment, we had minimal amounts of transmission from student to student. However, in an unmasked environment with the 6 feet as close contact, in an elementary classroom, one case would certainly lead to at least 4 quarantines of unvaccinated children, right? The people sitting around them. So if there were 60 elementary students who were present during a period of contagion, so that would have made 240 additional incidents of quarantine. Now, think about that with our older children. Now, thankfully, many more of them are vaccinated, right? But potentially, they would have the 4 people around them in a class, but then they go to 8 different classes. So worst case scenario would be 32 students who were out for quarantine due to 1 case. So I think where we started the school year as a mask required environment, I firmly believe that was the best decision related to achieving our goal of students in school with minimal disruption. And so if we consider moving forward related to peeling back the mask requirement, there are a lot of important things to consider, and the impact on student attendance is one of them. So we also need to consider the impact on our co-curricular activities. Clubs, of course, would be very similar to whatever we decided to the classroom. Winter sports, there's a lot still to be discussed and decided there, but it's a pretty different scenario than our fall sports, which were mostly outside. Because now we're talking about indoor sports that are very much close contact, right? Wrestling, basketball. There's definitely, we can probably expect that there will be winter sport related quarantines. Last year, the doctors would definitely, the doctors who meet with the superintendents, the doctors from UW Health, and the ones who are part of the ABC Collaborative would definitely say that last year sports had been a bit of a driver. We don't necessarily know if it was because of on-court or whatever else, but it also could have been from social situations connected to sports. So we don't really know how that played out exactly. Certainly is discussion regarding should we be lifting the mask requirement for active play. That's something to consider as the mask mandate is lifted on November 27th. And all of this is happening when we barely have enough substitutes to work our way through a day, right? So we'd have to understand that there would potentially be some impact there too related to the stress and strain on staff. You know, because a mask optional environment, if it led to more quarantines, then we certainly would have more of our younger students who needed, the streaming instruction, right? Live stream instruction. So there's a lot to add there. But it definitely is, something that we have to have as one of our considerations. So we'll sum it all up here. Our mask mandate ends on November 27th. That's about 3 weeks before winter break, okay? What we've been doing so far is working, and it continues to be the recommendation of all national experts. The vaccines just became available for that age group of 5 to 11. It's 5 weeks from their first dose, because it's first dose, 3 weeks to the next dose, and then 2 weeks to be considered fully immunized, right? So, we do believe that our vaccination rates are going to increase. And so with that, it may be a really good opportunity to consider peeling back the mask requirement after winter break, when we have that group of 5 to 11 have had the opportunity to become fully immunized, the parents who are choosing to do so. And that would be sort of our first step into what it would be like to ensure that we're continuing to meet our goal. And so if that's the course that we take, and we'll talk about that at the next board meeting, what we would do then after winter break is it would be a mask optional environment, and we would continue to collect our data, monitor the data, and we would certainly have to be ready to move back to a masked environment if that's what the data told us would keep our students in school. So that's really what the last box is about. We have to be able to be adaptive, but all the indicators are excellent. We know that the vaccination rate will go up. We believe that that's going to lead to significantly fewer cases. We know that what we have been doing is working so well that it is time to consider when should we be peeling back that next safety layer. However, we have to give it enough time to ensure that the students who aren't vaccinated and haven't been able to be have that opportunity before we do that. And action steps, and then we're done with this portion. So we're working on bringing a vaccination clinic to the school district, because we know that many of our parents would appreciate that. It's been a challenging piece, and the dates are only tentative, but we'll send it out if and when we get them. We're continuing to watch our local data, and we'll be able to announce any updates to the safety plan at the next board meeting. And we're continuing to recruit for substitutes. So what can our families do? I mean, this is very much a personal choice, but vaccination is definitely a step that families can take to get us closer to peeling back that mask layer. And then updating their students' vaccination status in Infinite Campus, so we know the percentage of students who are not vaccinated and could possibly be subject to quarantine if they were a close contact, because that's an important piece of information in making that decision. We'll be sending out a Google form to families so that if they have an update that they want to give us, something that's changed since August, they can do it through the Google form, and then we will change it in Infinite Campus for them. And then also, we're always saying, consider becoming a substitute, or at least spreading the word that we would love to have them do some recruitment for us too. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bergstrom. So the purpose of why I wanted this as a discussion item tonight is I think there's, as you know, it's a complex situation. And so I wanted Dr. Bergstrom to share with not only the board, but the community, all the factors involved and what it means. And so give us a chance as a board to ask questions tonight, and then really look at potentially having this as if we need to have as an action item on the 22nd meeting, or have Leslie give us an update of exactly what the recommendation is from the administration. So what I'd like to do now is just make sure we get all the questions out there, and that the board completely understands what Leslie's presented in terms of all the factors that go into if we make one decision or not one decision, what that does in terms of our students and our teachers. So that was the goal tonight, to give us all of that comprehensive information. So I will start with whoever would like to go first. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you, Leslie. I appreciate the presentation. From a contact tracing perspective, do we really have the bandwidth, the staff at this point to to keep track of who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated in every classroom, and what those, you know where I'm going.
Yeah, I do know where you're going. And it's a really excellent question. It would definitely be a stressor on the system. Because, our nursing staff, we have the nursing staff that we have in order to take care of the medical needs that existed prior to the pandemic. Right? So we know that this can't all go on our nursing staff. And consequently, we have one person that we have hired on a temporary basis to do the work for us as much as needs to happen. So potentially even up to full-time, and another part-time person who would be assisting with the efforts.
And so then what would the financial cost be of hiring additional staff to try and determine who needs to be quarantined and who doesn't need to be quarantined because of their vaccination status? And then do you also take into account whether individuals around them were wearing masks, and how is
Sadly, in a mask optional environment, it wouldn't matter.
yeah.
So we wouldn't have to consider who's wearing a mask. It would really just be who is sitting around the person who is in a contagious period. So as far as the cost, we're hoping that we will be able to make this work with the additional people we have already hired. However, if we cannot, then it would be about advertising and hiring for another person to do this work. And I'm assuming, Ms. Jonan, that's at about $20 some dollars an hour, 25. So that's not an inexpensive hire, but it's critical if we want the people who we already have employed to go about the business of educating.
And so when you say mask optional, that's just that. People can choose whether to wear a mask or not, regardless of their vaccination status. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Heather.
First of all, this is so exciting to even be talking about the idea of it whenever that might come. So let's start with that. I appreciate the overview on the national and the regional and the local level. And I was really happy to see the breakdown of the vaccination percentages. I guess my question is, people can update their status, and that will obviously then be reflected in the numbers, but how do we know? Are they, for my work, I had to scan and send my vaccination card. Is it just simply saying, yes, my child is vaccinated, or is there some sort of...
At this point, but there's also the Wisconsin Immunization Registry as a backup.
Okay.
We do ask people for permission to access that information.
Okay.
Is there anything to add to that, Gina?
Other than I would say when we have a close contact in terms of quarantines, we do verify it.
Okay.
So at that point,
if they were a close contact, we would ask for verification that the person was the students were, okay.
We do. We check the registry if we have consent, and if not, we ask for consent.
Okay.
And our families have been wonderful about working with us on that.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, and was hoping that was the case. My other two questions were, do we have, well, I'll flip my question. So the 7 to 12 makes sense to me because they've had adequate time. And I think, Kevin, I'm stealing your line again, but walking before we run, I guess I'm curious if we've explored the phased approach in peeling back a layer. So we can talk about that next week, but I would want some information on that. Okay.
Excuse me. Thank you, Andy. I do think we should address that. It's a good question, and it's worthy. One thing to consider in going that route is that we have a lot of blended households. So we have households with younger unvaccinated students with older vaccinated students. And if the older ones take off their masks and we see an increase in cases that could then go to the younger students, we could actually end up with an uptick of cases without, so it just seems to be, at this point, to be prudent to wait until the younger ones have theirs too. But I think a case could be made for the opposite also.
No, I think I was flipping it around and saying, come after winter break.
Oh.
I was saying, sorry, not Russia. So
Okay.
My understanding is after winter break, or next board meeting, we're going to,
talk about that.
Talk about that. But I guess what I'm saying is that it seems like let's walk before we run, and could we consider peeling back a safety layer at 7 through 12 and not K through 6, because 7 through 12 has had so much longer to get vaccinated? I guess that's my comment. And
Got it.
my question that goes along with that, sorry if I wasn't clear, was from a staffing perspective, you know, I can appreciate a teacher in high school who, you know, I think feels a lot better, 70%, hopefully higher, because this is August, but a second grade teacher who, you know, even if you want to get vaccinated doesn't mean you can get in right away, and that happens. And so removing the mask piece from K through 6 at the same time of 7 to 11 feels strange to me. I don't know if that's the appropriate time to comment, but I'll stop there, but that's my thinking.
Kevin or Tim, who would like to go next?
Thanks for the presentation, Dr. Bergstrom. You had mentioned that Oregon is doing a really good job when you look at the outside versus inside school data, which makes a lot of sense to me. Do we know how Oregon compares to other school districts in Dane County where the same mask mandate has been in place?
Well, all I can tell you, I don't know everybody else's data. But what I do know is what we have learned through our participation in the ABC Collaborative Study. And right now, we have the lowest rate of transmission within any of the schools who participated in the study.
Yeah, I was really just curious if we knew, you know, it'd be great to understand the cause and effect of that. Is it, are the kids just doing a better job of being absent when they should be absent, not feeling well? Are we having more access, more availability for washing hands? I'm just curious what the cause and effect is.
I think that is such a good question. We've been talking about that too. And one of the things, obviously, I think when I'm in the schools, I can see that there are still kids who are struggling with their masks. So it's not as if we're perfect on that, and we wouldn't expect to be. But one of the things that we're doing that I think is different is the Panther Pledge, and the fact that when people are calling in ill with symptoms that could possibly be related to COVID, someone from the school district is following up with them and talking to them about getting tested and returning when they test. And I think that that's probably been one of those extra steps that we have taken that has led to really our school environment being very safe right now.
Very interesting. I guess the last thing I'd say is the same thing Heather said about being very excited about moving down this path, and I fully support getting to a mask optional situation as soon as possible. And you know, maybe it is a phased approach, but you know, there'll be a time when people have had ample opportunity to get vaccinated if that's the choice they make. And if they don't, it's time to get back to some normalcy. Thank you.
Tim, go ahead.
Lots of great questions have already been asked, so I have some kind of peripheral questions. You mentioned, Leslie, that we've had about 101 cases. 102 cases of students being present in school during the period that we know of. Okay. Do we have any sense of the people who have tested positive, students who have tested positive, whether they've been vaccinated or unvaccinated? Just curious. And with regards to subs, how is it going with subs? What's the, is it getting better? Is it about the same? Or is it getting more tight from a accessibility?
It's staying pretty consistent. I'd say that there are some days when we're as many as 5 subs short in a school building. And teachers are covering for one another, or principals are subbing, or we're so grateful to have our building subs, who we have, we're hoping to have at least 2 at each building who show up every day no matter what and are assigned. That's been a really big piece. But even with that, we're consistently short.
And the need for subs, is it being caused by the virus, or is it just natural family matters? Is there been a skew one way or another?
You mean the reason for teacher absence?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that there are some absences that are related to teachers following the Panther Pledge and not coming to school when in a normal year, perhaps they would come with a sore throat and a cough, right? But now, we don't want them to come with a sore throat and a cough. So there's definitely a component of it that's a part of that. But I also think that's kind of counterbalanced with the idea that we have stopped doing all professional development during the school day. We've stopped pulling people out in order to ensure that there were subs available for things like people who couldn't come to school because they had symptoms that were on the Panther Pledge. I think really what we're experiencing is more a shift in the labor market in general. And it's, you know, part of what we read, that it's really impacting every industry, and it's certainly impacting us.
We saw the list of, from grade to grade, what the percentage of vaccinations are. What does it look like for staff?
Excellent. Our professional staff are at 98%, is that correct? 99%.
Great. And when you say professional staff, is that just educators or is that paraprofessionals and everybody?
Our hourly staff have a lower rate of vaccination, 77, something around there. Woohoo! All right, that's pretty darn good too.
Great. Thank you. That's it from me.
Troy or Anna, who would like to go?
Yeah, I can go quickly. I mean, first of all, yeah, this is really, really exciting. So it's incredibly exciting to be talking about this at this point. I guess kind of going back to Heather's point about phasing in maybe the high school before elementary, I guess I'm kind of pausing on that because, you know, by the numbers, we've got 60 to 75% of our families. If we were to translate that at the high school level of those who are vaccinated to the elementary school, that, you know, one would expect that 60 to 75% of our elementary school families want to be vaccinated. And we're looking at 5 weeks from now. To me, it just feels like that end of the year, the holiday break at the end of the year is maybe a reasonable time to consider the lift, because we would have the ability for those who want to be vaccinated to be vaccinated. And you know, following that up, I'm not crazy about a situation where we would have to go back and forth between no mask and mask. I think we have to always have that on the table because that's the reality that we live in. But if it means another week or another 2 weeks of fully masked in order to get to that point where we can confidently lift, I think it's very worthwhile to do that instead of, you know, number one, risking more quarantines and kids being out of school, but number two, just the demand on staff in having, because I understand it's a huge effort to enforce, and consistency is really important. So yeah, I mean, very thorough. I don't have any additional questions on what's been.
You have to have a substitute teaching license, which could be acquired through DPI and an online course, but we also offer the course here on occasion, correct, Gina? Anything else? I didn't want to miss anything.
You need a background check and then potentially fingerprints depending on where you've lived, so that can slow us down a little bit. But Lisa in the HR department is a pro at helping people get licensed, and we also reimburse as long as you sub for a day for us. So that has been really helpful this year.
Anna, welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me join late. Sorry to be here late, but I appreciate being able to be here for this particular topic because it is exciting and a great thing for me to walk in on, hearing about potential mask optional things coming our way. So, a couple of questions. I guess, did I miss some information related to, have we seen student-to-student transmission within our schools? Do we know what that number is relative to the number of cases that we've seen? And then I guess, was there a comparison of how that stands up next to other districts or other regional, national statistics? I'm curious to know about that. If I missed it, I'm sorry, but can that be recapped a little bit?
So we'll be able to give you some better information from the ABC Collaborative shortly, because Katie enters all of our data in weekly, and then they compare us against masked and unmasked districts throughout the country. Related to other districts, we have one of the highest, if not the highest rate of keeping transmission out of the classrooms from any of the districts that were studied. And so we talked about why might that be, right? However, even with everything we have in place, there have been a couple of incidents of class transmission. And, sometimes it's hard to tell exactly why that's happened or how it's happened, but I wish I could say it's zero, but it's not zero. However, it's remarkably low compared to other school districts.
Thank you. And I guess my next question really gets down to if we're going to see an uptick in quarantines with a mask optional environment, what is the impact, I guess, one, on our teachers who are dealing with that synchronous instruction or whatever we're calling that for the elementary school level? And then how about those middle school and high school kids? How does it impact those students and those teachers? Because I just want to understand how this plays out if we're going to see and be willing to accept more quarantines, what this impact has on staff and students in our district.
Thank you, Anna, because that's a really important consideration, particularly if we don't hit a very high vaccination rate in the ages 5 to 11. If predictions play out and it's only a 30% vaccination rate and we lift the mask requirement, that could really be a huge burden on our staff, our students, and our families, because then that goes into more quarantines. And then that for the grades 5 through 6, it's a live streaming process, which takes a lot to get going and to be done well. And getting people their materials and making sure it's all in place, it is a considerable factor. For our students in grades 7 through 12, they would be accessing their materials through Google Classroom. And I think our teachers are already doing a lot of work to ensure that everything that they're doing is accessible via Google Classroom. However, we know from last year that that is not the same as being in school with your peers, with your teacher. And so that's why we've been doing everything we've been doing to keep to the goal of in-person learning with minimal disruption.
Thanks. Those are my key questions.
Great. Leslie and Erica, I really appreciate, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to be really clear because I think maybe I wasn't before. And so just also for the people who are listening or listening later, first of all, I'm not advocating that we drag our feet by any means, on the K through 6 piece, but I think about also the kids in K through 6 from an equity perspective who maybe aren't the first ones to get the appointment for vaccines or don't have somebody advocating or making, taking off of work or whatever it is that's needed to be done. And I appreciate that we're hoping to do a vaccination clinic, but I'm not sure that solves it. And so then even when those kids come to school with a mask, if it's mask optional and they're in close contact, they're quarantining. And so I just want to pause on that piece of it, as well as I just think, if we can approach 7 to 11 and then pause, see how it goes before we just rip the Band-Aid off. I'm not trying to elongate anybody wearing masks, unnecessarily, but it just seems to make sense to me, especially because of the newness of this K to 6 piece, or the 5 to 11-year-olds, that we might want to consider that. So I just wanted to clarify my muddy comments before.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, a couple things related to that. One, Alliant Energy Center just announced that they're going to have vaccination clinics. That was an announcement through the city of Madison today that families in ages 5-11 can now do Alliant Center like we did in terms of our vaccine. So I think that's a very good move for Dane County to help get kids vaccinated and probably have a lot of different hours to do that, which will complement. I think you've heard some other school districts that are having vaccination clinics. That has a lot to do with the health insurance that is carried by that school district. For example, I think it's Sun Prairie and Middleton have SSM Health, and they have the bandwidth. SSM Health has the bandwidth to have that vaccination. Oregon School District is not with SSM Health, so that creates some challenges for us in terms of getting a vaccination clinic. So I want to make sure people have facts, but we are working really hard to try and get vaccination clinics here. I think the other thing is, we came up with the Panther Pledge, or Erica came up with the Panther Pledge. We have a goal in front of us as a school district right now, and that's to get our kids and our families vaccinated. And the future looks really bright, and we now have a goal in front of us in terms of getting to a mask-free environment. It starts with keeping kids in school, and then getting masks off. And so to keep kids in school, we need families vaccinated. And so we look at our staff is at 99%, and our hourly staff is at 85%. We have a goal for families to get there. And then we have a really, really unique opportunity after a holiday break. So I think let's put it on ourselves and let's make a new Panther pledge to get everybody vaccinated. Let's get to this place that we want to be, which is kids in school without masks on. So thank you, Dr. Bergstrom. I really appreciate your work on getting us all this information. We will have more at the meeting on the 22nd, and we also will have some more data. You know, we have meetings through the rest of this year, so we can continue to watch the numbers rise, but I really hope that we see vaccination numbers rise, because that gets us to where we want to be. We know the data shows us that the more people that are vaccinated, the less risk you have of getting COVID, and that's what we want. And that is data, and that's fact. So let's do it. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on.
Well, I'll make a quick comment, is that once again, Erica Mundinger won yet another award. She wins quite a few, and she never puts them in the superintendent updates, so note that. But with the Wisconsin School Public Relations Association gave her yet another award for the Panther Pledge, for the development of the Panther Pledge. So I really think that's had, thank you, Erica. I think that's had a big impact on how we've been able to keep kids in school. All right, the rest of this, until we get to the superintendent's report, will be quite brief because we've spoken about it already this evening. So for visioning and strategic planning, the graph that we have seen many times, it shows all of the different pieces and who's responsible for what. And the fact that Portrait of a Graduate is really a significant part of our visioning process as a district, and that we are in the midst of continuing to collect feedback. And I'm excited that the policy committee will have an opportunity to give their input on that, as well as multiple stakeholder groups. So what's the action point related to Portrait, or related to really all the visioning and strategic planning? The decision-making framework is moving forward to policy on Monday the 15th, which is an exciting step. And then we have Portrait of a Graduate feedback process with first the focus group participants, the staff, the students, and the community. And I also want to say thank you to everyone who was at the visioning committee meeting last week, because that really took us a big step forward in getting closer to what we wanted this to look like. So our teaching and learning update, once again, it's going to be very brief, because we spent quite a bit of time already this evening talking about healthy students and staff, and mental health and wellness. That was really everything that we talked about related to the screener. So unless there are questions, I can move right to the superintendent's report. I bet you can guess what the first picture is going to be. Yes, indeed. It was a very exciting final game against the Whitefish Bay Dukes, and it was a decisive 3-1 victory. Extraordinarily fun to watch from the stands, and to see the students on the team and their reaction to winning, and how much joy they were sharing with one another and with the crowd. There was joy in abundance on this evening. So many congratulations to this terrific team and their coaches. Another round of congratulations to two of our educators. You see Laura Burns in the middle and Nate Mendel in the gray suit beside her. And last week I was able to attend with them the state music conference at Monona Terrace when they received their award. And this is for the Make Music Oregon piece that they did last fall as part of the pandemic. So it was the 2021 Melvin F. Pontius Creative Sparks Award by the Wisconsin Music Educators Association. So they did a wonderful job. And then it's always fun to just give an update on how our Panther construction class is doing. Because you can see Mr. Prall's class, they're at it again in the Autumn Woods neighborhood. And this is how far they've come since September already. So our students are really doing an amazing job building yet another house, and it'll be exciting to see the finished product. I think we're all just extraordinarily proud that we're able to offer this learning opportunity to our students. It's really something else. And then, yay, the Oregon High School math team. Our Oregon High School students recently participated in the Madison Area Math League competitions. They did very well individually and as a team. Oregon Varsity 1 team took first place in the medium school division and second overall out of 51 total schools, so good for them. And our Oregon Varsity 2 took third place in the medium school division. Individually, Josh Dieter, Tyler Fisher, Aaron Hagson all took first place, Owen McKee a second, Will Cram a fifth, and Celia Ebert and Zeke Jeske both took sixth. And remember, this is out of 51 schools and all of the participants, so
Don't we kind of
really
have a dynasty?
amazing.
Can't we call this a math team dynasty?
We have a bit of that going on. It's really exciting. So very proud of our students and their accomplishments in this arena too. And then it was the annual OMS egg drop. And Erica was over there taking some pictures. We have a little video. Do we want to give it a shot?
Even those of us who have passed that by, your kids still remember the egg drop, right? I mean, that's a highlight. You've got that to look forward to.
Yeah.
Hamburger bun and Tupperware.
Oh, there are rules.
Very fun stuff. And I was fortunate enough to be there that morning on a different issue, and there was an egg in the hallway, and Dr. Anderson was like, "It's egg drop day," you know. So just an egg in the hallway is really no big deal. That's it, everybody.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bergstrom. Okay, in terms of future agenda, I think we'll have some additional items coming from policy. We'll talk about health and safety protocols coming up. If anybody else has anything they'd like to see on the 22nd agenda, please do let me know. And then we will move to checkout. We'll go around the room. Mary, starting with you.
I have nothing, but thank you.
Heather. Troy. Anna.
That's where I was before this night's meeting at the soccer banquet, and just a big thank you to the coaches and the staff and everyone who really did so much work to pull off an amazing, incredible season for all of our athletes, and just really incredible season. So that's all.
Kevin.
No, except to build on that, I thank the soccer team for giving me bragging rights because my brother is in the Whitefish Bay school district. So he was bragging about the team. I said, well, just wait. So thank you to the soccer team for that.
Tim. Okay. We will now move into, we'll take a little short recess, and then we will move into closed session.
Krista, just noting that I will recuse myself from closed session as my wife has a contract with the district. So.
Okay. Thank you, Troy.